is another recommended way of disciplining a child. It can work in some instances. You can use it effectively, and what we say is, okay, if the child is 5 years old, give time out for about 5 minutes. So not very long, just a short time where the child kind of probably gets an opportunity to think about what is done and how he can do it.
So the recommended time is around 5 minutes?
1 minute for 1 year of age. So
is that effective though?
It is effective because it doesn't have to be a long time. It is kind of traumatic for the child if it is too long.
Well, I can't remember if I was 15 when she did ask me to stand for 15 minutes. But I'm sure she had the right idea.
Definitely.
The correct technique.
See how I turned up.
Doctor, our next point is establishing rules. How does that work with children?
It's good to have a set of rules because then the kids know what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. And sometimes even kind of parents might not agree on certain things because two parents come from two different backgrounds and they kind of get together, parent, a child, and they've had two different kind of sets of experience as children and of being parented. So the parents might need to kind of sit down and discuss what exactly they expect their child to do, whether they want their child to go to bed at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or what. The parents need to be clear about rules for the child first. They need to come to an agreement, compromise a little bit and agree on what the rules are going to be. And if the child is old enough, it's always nice to get the child also involved in making this set of rules.
Okay.
Make it short, don't have a lot of rules, just a few rules. So that kind of, and the rules can be there.
But then again, what would happen, doctor, if the child becomes unreasonable? When you do actually, make the set of rules with them?
Yeah, and they say, but my friend gets to come home at this time. Why am I coming home at this time?
Well, each family is different and you have to tell your child, okay, this is how things happen in our family.
Okay.
And we kind of make this set of rules. Your friend's family is different. So, and if the child is unreasonable, I mean, just kind of talking to the child and explaining to the child. And sometimes, I mean, the parents are kind of at the top, but kids have to understand that too. Parents have the right to decide, and what parents say goes. So
okay, doctor,
you have
just to touch on to the next point, which is something actually we see in a lot of Western movies, which is those famous words, "You're grounded."
That's probably kind of taking away privileges. That's also another effective way of disciplining kids. And probably if some undesirable behavior is seen, or if the children are not listening to the parents, okay, you tell the kid to do your homework. You tell the kid once to do your homework, and if the child is not listening, you can maybe repeat the instruction and say, if you don't do your homework, okay, no TV this afternoon. So that could be an effective way of getting the kids to do something.
I think we did also touch upon our next topic as well, Doctor. We were going to ask you about withholding privileges as well. So grounding also.
Grounding, it's kind of a form of withholding privileges. Okay, you're not allowed to go out with your friends, or you're not allowed to go to this party. So it's again withholding privileges.
So what kind of other privileges can a parent withhold from a child to sort of establish those rules?
Again, it can't be anything that is traumatic to the child, something that the child needs to do or the child is going to benefit from doing, but something that the child likes also, like watching TV, watching cartoon, or maybe not playing with the iPod or whatever, the games that they play. So just kind of withholding that privilege and not letting the child.
All right, doctor. On that note, if you just tuned in, we are talking to Dr. Linika Vijayaratne on techniques on how to discipline your children, and we'll be talking a lot more on that with another special guest as well. So don't go away. We'll be right back after a short break.
morning and welcome back to GMSL, and for those of you who just joined us, we've been discussing disciplining your children with Dr. Linika, and right now in the studio we have a psychologist, and it's Dr. Janet Lavalle. Welcome to GMSL, Doctor, and it's so great to have you. Dr. Janet is the Academic Dean of the Colombo Institute of Research and Psychology. She has a PhD in Cross-Cultural Psychology, an ABD in Sociology, an OMD in Chinese Traditional Medicine. She's also the Director of the Institute of Traditional Asian Psychology, which is about to be launched this month, and she's also an academic advisor for SoulLink. She also has many other certifications, and it's so great to have you here, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yes, and it's so great to have a psychologist and a psychiatrist here to discuss this topic with us.
I'm so sorry to disappoint you, though. I'm sure that inviting a psychiatrist and a psychologist, you assumed fireworks would soon erupt. But in fact, it seems we agree on everything. How boring.
No.
Well, of course, often people misinterpret the term psychologist to psychiatrist and psychiatrist to psychologist. What is the difference, really?
Well, we don't seem to have very much difference, but probably if we had to pin it down, I guess we'd say that I don't give medication, although I agree that there's a need for medication. So when that happens, then I would refer to her. She probably doesn't do extended psychotherapy, but I don't know you particularly. Is that true?
Only the basics.
Yeah, because we don't have so many psychiatrists in this country, so psychiatrists really have to stick to getting people stabilized, and they deal more with mental illness, and psychologists can deal with that, but we deal more with psychotherapy, with talk therapies, with art therapy, music therapy, experiential therapies, more than a psychiatrist normally does, although that line can get fudged.
Well, we've actually been talking a lot during the last segment about how to discipline your children, and we'll be talking a lot about it, but of course one hard point when it comes to children is when they're spoiled. It's really hard to discipline children if you consider your children to be a bit spoiled, and we've got an interesting video to some techniques to overcome that, so check it out.
Child demanding. Put an end to their demands. You will need time to spend with your child, limits, a chore list, and self-examination. Step 1. Be a good role model. If you moan when things don't work out, your child will notice. Step 2. Stand up to your child when it's easier to give in. Your job is to teach them they can't always have what they want. Step 3. Sit with your child and pick out toys that can be given away to charity. This will teach them the importance of giving and not just receiving. Step 4. Do things with your child that don't involve spending money. Quality time with them is the best gift you can give them. Step 5. Give them chores so that they learn responsibility. Step 6. Never bribe your children to behave, or they will expect compensation for doing the right thing. Never bribe your child to eat healthy food. Studies indicate it makes them like it even less. Step 7. Family members need to respect the boundaries you set. Step 8. Know the consequences of spoiling your child. Studies indicate that spoiled children grow up to be unmotivated and depressed teenagers.
Well, there was a video on how to discipline your spoiled children. Doctors, would you agree?
No.
No?
I think
different opinions?
I don't know if you agree. I felt that there were some very good points made in terms of that children need to have boundaries to work within, to be comfortable. I thought it's a good point that you need to spend quality time with your children, that you shouldn't force them to eat certain foods. There were some good points there, so I don't have a problem with the whole video.
What about the concept of the spoiled child?
Yes, I have two problems with this video. One is the concept of the spoiled child, because what is a spoiled child? A spoiled child is simply a parent, I think, who hasn't done their job properly, or maybe out of ignorance, or maybe out of good intentions, but didn't know how to go about it. a lot of times parents think the child's spoiled because they throw temper tantrums. But temper tantrums are very normal at a certain age.
Okay.
And that isn't something to say, oh, the child's spoiled. Or maybe the child has a lot of toys and the parent says, oh, the child's spoiled because they want more toys and more toys. It's natural. We also want more toys. We get a car, we want a better car. We get a house, we want a bigger house. So are we worrying about ourselves being spoiled? No. Yet we look at the child and think, oh, the child's never going to appreciate what they have. Well, maybe then we're throwing material items at the child, and we ought to be spending more quality time and less quality toys. Also, I have a problem with this video with an underlying assumption that I picked up, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I felt like this video talked about what the parent should do to the child. And I think this concept of a spoiled child really falls in line with that assumption, that if the child's spoiled, then the mother and father have to do something to the child.
That's a very interesting concept, and unfortunately we've come to the end of our time for this session, but we will get back to this as soon as we take a commercial break. So we'll come back and we have to discuss this in detail. So short commercial break.
Welcome back to the show. Yeah, this is Good Morning Sri Lanka on MTV Sports, and of course we've been talking to Dr. Linika, who is a psychiatrist, and Dr. Janet, who is a psychologist, on the topic of disciplining your kids. Now, on that same topic, doctors, I have a question for you. Now, of course, there are several methods that are spelled out in terms of parenting. A lot of people, especially when you go to on the internet, you get different views. Psychologists have their views, psychiatrists have their views, but sometimes when you go and talk to certain parents about it, they say, don't teach me how to discipline my kids, right? But then again, different people have different conceptions about how to discipline your kids, whether they're spelled out, whether doctors have spelled it out or not. So what do you have to say to that?
I run into a lot of parents who say, why, don't tell us to not hit our children and not spank our children, because my father did that to me and he took a belt to me and I turned out just fine. But actually he didn't turn out just fine. A lot of these people I know, they did not turn out just fine. They're very messed up people, but they think they turned out fine, and why they think they turned out fine is because, it's a circular logic where they assume they turned out fine because their standards are abnormal.
But what about the fact that a lot of these parents say that in order for them to drill that point into a child, and if you just have a discussion with the child is never going to understand. The only reason I understood that I wasn't supposed to do that is because I was given a shot by my father or by my mother. What do you do in cases like that?
You have to ask yourself what it is you're trying to teach the child. So if you want to teach the child aggression, then you hit the child. If you want to teach the child that a person who's bigger and has more power has the right to remove human dignity and human rights from a marginalized person, then that's the lesson that you're teaching.
Dr.
But it actually, according to science, there's plenty of scientific research on this, and there's not a single article that shows that hitting a child actually teaches them anything. And there's lots of research that shows that discussing things helps, because you want the child to internalize what you're teaching. You want your values to be passed on, and they don't get internalized by hitting the child. You just taught aggression.
Does that research also indicate that children become more stubborn if you do use aggression on them, or do they turn? What exactly happens to children who are exposed to corporal punishment on a regular basis?
Research is clear. They have lower self-esteem. They have worse grades at school. They are not able to focus as well. Children